1 year ago at the villa in Abuja, I said that we got June 12th being recognized from the least expected quarters, and that is from General Buhari. See, we never expect General Buhari to do it. We expected Obasanjo to do it.
All right,
I don't know what got into his head.
My apologies. Let me jump in and bring in Mr. Fallon at this point. Now, given several expectations at the time, the quest to deepen democracy, the tenets of democracy, expectations from the people, participatory democracy. Now, given where we're coming from and where we are today, perhaps also looking at the event that transpired yesterday in the National Assembly, how deep-rooted or otherwise, Mr. Fallon, would you say democracy is at the moment in the country?
Well, I think there is this little historical inaccuracy that I think I should just try to intervene with respect to the submission of Komrekukori. I don't think it would be fair for those who went to jail during the struggle for independence, and what we witnessed, the Iva Valley massacre, the jail of people like Tony Nahoro, Mogo Okoye, Abdullahi, and all those young people, the struggle of even the labor union, Kola, of 1945. We can't wish away those struggles, which culminated in the independence, the flag independence of 1960. I will agree with you, it was a flag independence. But that is not to say that Nigerians were not attacked, Nigerians were not killed by the British, forces. Of course, you also record the Aba revolt of 1929 that led to the killing of about 55 women. In the Iva Valley, massacre of 1949, where workers, coal miners were protesting, again, we lost over 20 people. So that is the blood that was shed for, the struggle for independence. So that's why I'm saying that it was not just a tea. Where for the politicians, it was a Lancaster affair. But for the ordinary people in our country, there was a struggle for genuine independence. But coming to your question, yes, beyond the symbolism of June 12th, which is very significant, and I also want to join Comrade Kokori here, in commending the Buhari regime, President Buhari, for recognizing June 12th as Democracy Day. But beyond the symbolism of the day, we must look at the significance of the June 12th mandate, having regards to the fact that Abiola's campaign was anchored on farewell to poverty. 26 years down the line, can we say our country has said farewell to poverty? On the contrary, poverty is exacerbating in our country. And this is what had led to the reckless killings of people by bandits in the northwest, insurgents in the northeast, kidnappers, armed robbers in all the areas of the country. Although some mischievous elements or some mischievous political leaders are now giving the impression, that kidnapping is peculiar to a particular ethnic group in the country, therefore other areas of the country are being invaded by these kidnappers from some strange land. But our studies have revealed that young people from across the country, belonging to different ethnic and religious persuasions, are fighting against the system. And therefore, kidnappers are drawn from all over the country. So you can't say, those who are kidnapping people are from a particular part of the country. But I'm saying that these contradictions are manifesting themselves because poverty, unemployment, insecurity have become the order of the day in our country. So we can't say it's Uhuru yet. I believe that what we are celebrating today should be a challenge to the government and the entire people of Nigeria to rededicate themselves to the struggle for genuine change, struggle for democracy, for the rule of law, for human rights and security. We shouldn't be, after 26 years of June 12, be battling with those who are being detained without trial in our country, and thousands are in detention, Others have been arrested for wandering by the police, were harassed. The law against wandering was abolished in 1989. So for me, yes, what happened in the National Assembly yesterday, yes, okay, you know. But beyond the election of the officers yesterday, let us see how the leadership of the National Assembly will address the challenges of the moment, particularly how we can actualize the provisions of Chapter 2 of the Constitution. Access to education, access to affordable health for all and sundry, good roads, security for our people. Because the Constitution insists that the welfare and security of Nigerians shall be the primary purpose of government. So for this regime, yes, we commend you for recognizing June 12th as the real democracy day. But beyond the symbolism of the holiday, we must now get down to the business of governing our country so that we can, people can work freely, you know, and without allowing criminal elements to take over the monopoly of violence in our country, as it is the case today.
Mr. Fallon, if I can just quickly follow up on what you said now. You mentioned that the hunger figures, that you mentioned that the focus of the campaign of Chief M.K. Abiola in 1993 was more about eradicating poverty. But if you juxtapose that with the figures that we have now, most certainly they are really heart-rending. But then there is a difference between poverty and hunger. And if you also look at the hunger figures, they are also very, very staggering. So in terms of how we play our politics and how people, the Nigerian people, react or respond or join in deepening democracy, there was a lot of talk about vote buying and all of that. So naturally, people wanted to satisfy the hunger of the moment. But going forward, how can people really participate in the democratic process with a long-term vision in mind as opposed to solving today's problems? Because today's problems are real, fundamental, and present. Mr. Fallon, can you hear me, sir?
I can hear you now.
Okay. I said, if you look at the figures, you said something the other time about the importance, the relevance of the June 12 campaigns of Chief M.K. Abiola to the fact that you referred it to the fact that the campaign was focused on eradicating poverty at that time. The figures today are much worse. Juxtapose poverty figures with hunger figures, which is what the average voter wants to solve as quickly as possible because they're hungry. Someone is offering them money to buy their votes. They sell the vote and then they get the money. How do we encourage people to participate in the democratic process with the vision of deepening democracy sustainably as opposed to solving today's problem alone today?
Well, what a politician calls stomach infrastructure is totally unacceptable. It's opportunistic. But what has happened in our country is that whereas up to the Second Republic, political parties had issue-based campaigns. There were, in the Second Republic particularly, you had the PRP and the UPN, Unity Party of Nigeria, People's Redemption Party, talking about access to education, access to basic necessities of life, while the MPN was talking of right to housing and the rest of them. But today, there is total monetization of the political process, whereby politicians or political parties no longer campaign on the basis of the rights of our people. Politicians now treat Chapter 2 of the Constitution with disdain. So what do you expect in the process? It is people now going to town, politicians now going to town to promise or to give money, bags of rice, bags of salt, and the rest of them. So if we are going to, we should again stop attacking the ordinary people who are compelled to receive money in exchange for their votes, you know. I mean, to take money, what we call vote buying now. It takes two to tango. And for me, we are wasting so much time on demonizing Nigerians. There are criminals all over the world. But what do we do to enforce the law? Sections 124 of the Electoral Act is against any form of vote buying, any form of voter inducement. But what are the law enforcement authorities doing? What is the government doing to attack this group? But you're not going to succeed in prosecuting people who engage in vote buying without addressing job creation. And I think that was the point President Paul Kagame of Rwanda made yesterday, talking about corruption. And you're not going to defeat the monster of corruption without job creation, without wealth creation. And this country has abundant human and natural resources that other countries are jealous of to make all of us, all Nigerians, have access to basic necessities of life. We have no business with poverty. We have no business with ignorance or illiteracy. If the resources of this country are well husbanded, if there is equitable distribution of the wealth of our country, there will be enough for each and every Nigerian so that we can say farewell to poverty.
Let me get your thoughts on this, Malam Umaru, because from his submissions, it will seem to suggest to a lot of people that perhaps we've not made the kind of significant gains that we want, despite democracy and the significance of today. So, in your thoughts, do you think that democracy can address the issues of restructuring?
Well, I believe democracy and good governance indeed can address the issues of be it devolution or restructuring, whatever form of restructuring you want to bring in. However, I would like to address the issue of June 12, or comment on this from the perspective of the correction of an injustice by this government and President Muhammad Buhari. A lot has been said, he has been commended. But I think one needs to appreciate that it's a correction that was deliberate, very significant, and indeed send a very strong signal that there is someone, a leader that we have with the conviction of correcting injustices and wrongs of the past. And he has indeed demonstrated that in many aspects of governance. And the fact that, as I'm sure my brother had also mentioned earlier, that younger Nigerians do not even appreciate much of what really happened in June 12. June 12 is Nigeria at its best. It's Nigeria and Nigerians coming together and appreciating the union as a people of one nation with one common destiny. A people that, you know, see themselves as one people, not the divisions we have between, with different social classifications and regional classifications, but a people that appreciate leadership from the context of competence, capacity, and what you are able to deliver. You know, there are two political actors, two political parties, mainly that contested that election. And like Senator Zungina said, Chief MKO Abiola actually defeated a candidate from my own state, in his ward, in his local government, and in the state. But equally important and something that needs to be appreciated is the fact that Alhaji Bashir Usman Tofa, who alhamdulillah is still alive, recognized that election, congratulated the winner in the spirit of statesmanship, in the spirit of, you know, players in a political space that respect the will of the people, because people had spoken and they have chosen their leadership. So it is a fundamental injustice that was correct, that was done and corrected by such a remarkable statesman, in a leader as General Muhammadu Buhari. And he has been towing this line of correcting ills of the past. And he is known as a state-first, sensitive leader because he did listen. He did appreciate the yearnings and the aspirations of Nigerians with a view to, validating what they had done, irrespective of the time it took. And as a true Democrat, who indeed, like many people say, is coming from the unlikely quarters, but I think President Muhammadu Buhari is perhaps one of the finest Democrats I have seen, because this is a man that believes in the rule of law. And you cannot have democracy without respect for the rule of law. We went to election 4 times, only winning the 4th time. And all the 3 times, what did President Muhammadu Buhari did was to go to the courts. This is to show the respect and the recognition that true democracy cannot thrive on an altar of chaos, violence, or weeping sentiments. He never once told his supporters...
Pardon me, we need to go to break, but we'll get the views of Mr. Kokori when we'll come back next, after the break. Welcome back to Democracy Day, the 12th of June. It's a public holiday as well. That bill has been signed into law. So May 29 will just be inauguration and handover day. But Chief Kokori, let me ask you, what would you consider as critical ingredients in a good democratic system? Are they evident today, and what should we be doing to do better than we are today?
Thank you very much. To me, there is no alternative to democracy. No alternative to democracy. Even though I and majority of Nigerians are disillusioned with the 20 years of democracy. Disillusioned because we wanted a better deal. And that is why we went into that struggle. And that struggle, there was a lot of deprivations. There was blood. There was suffering. And people paid the supreme sacrifice. So I continue to say there is no alternative to democracy, no matter what it is. But we have to be in this democracy to improve on this democracy. The one that we, Nigerians, wanted, to better the living standard of our people. And let me say one thing. I think I was misquoted by my junior comrade here. We appreciate the struggle of the founding fathers of this country. But there's a difference between when you fight a military, ruthless African military dictatorship than when you fight the benevolent British colonialist of that time. Because I grew up at that time, attending primary school at that time. I have my eyes open. We went to Empire Day. There was humane everywhere. Humane type of living all over the country. But I know the difference between a struggle against a ruthless African dictatorship, a third country African ruthless general dictatorship, than when you fight for economic struggles. You talk of Iva Valley. Iva Valley was an economic struggle of workers trying to get their rights. You don't have to even mobilize people, just like the minimum wage of Nigeria today. People will go on the street, you don't mobilize. It is political struggles that you mobilize. Even the about women struggles, which we all know, and which we appreciate. It was a struggle against taxation. Femi Ransom Kuti's mother, what he did in Abeokuta was a struggle against taxation. You don't mobilize people on that, but you mobilize people for political struggle. Look at what is happening in Sudan today. The Sudanese, those who are now struggling today to bring democracy to Sudan, they are the heroes of Sudan. They are the heroes of Sudan. Look at what is happening in faraway Venezuela. Maduro is there. He controls the military. And the Guaido man was there. He said he won an election.
What about the West?
I don't know that. But I'm saying that political struggles are more difficult to fight. Not economic struggles. I'm a trade union leader. I'm trained as a trade union leader. But when I dabbled into politics, people would tell you, you separate trade unionism from policy. What is politics? What is economy? What economy and politics go hand in hand. And what I'm saying, that it was in June 1993 and 94, up to 98, that Nigerians faced the barriers of the gun. And they said they were not fighting for salary increase. Every worker in the world will fight for salary increase without being mobilized. And that is why I still pay honor and respect to those veterans of the June 12 struggle. As I'm saying, I will always commend the oil workers of this country. Because that struggle, we realized that, you see, the civil society in Nigeria, we are not trained as freedom fighters, like what you have in South Africa. And Nigerian workers were not trained to fight for political struggles. They were trained to fight for economism. So when we went into that struggle, we knew that it is 50-50. You can come out alive or not, because you are dealing with a ruthless dictator. I don't think Babangida was as ruthless as Abacha. They need power. They wanted power. They never wanted to relinquish power to Nigerians. And that is why I pay absolute respect to those who came out. And when I say about this, I'm talking of the civil society who were fighting the military with bare hands. I'm talking of the Nadeko people who were fighting with bare hands. I'm talking of the Afenifere people. People say it was the Western something. It wasn't a Western something. I'm from the Niger Delta Creeks.
All right,
but we in the oil union, we mobilized. There's no question. It wasn't a tea party. We knew what we were doing. Unfortunately, at that time, I was not too much of an old man. And I've undergone, at that time, a lot of training with freedom fighters in all parts of the world, especially in the socialist West. And I came and I knew Nigeria had no crop of freedom fighters. They had no crop. And that is why Abdullah was picked just like that in the middle of the night.
All right, Chief Okore, pardon me.
Yes. Take placards to LEC Palace.
Okay, let me take it up from there.
Take placards to LEC Palace.
I need to, my apologies, I need to bring it back to Lagos. I suspect Mr. Fallon may want to respond, but that will be after we get the views of the gentleman in Lagos. Senator Sani, is there a gap, talking about the struggle, politicians, civil society, holding governments accountable, ensuring that some of those key ingredients that we want to see in a democratic dispensation are upheld, we'll hold them accountable to it. Is there a gap in terms of those who are supposed to hold them accountable? Are they doing what they ought to do? Or is it that when they get into politics, we just play politics and don't address those key issues which both the struggle and politicians want to deliver to the people, which we refer to as dividends of democracy?
Yeah, quickly. First of all, it is important for us to recall that one of the greatest undoing of the forces of freedom, those who liberated this country from military dictatorship, was our inability in 1999 to take up the political mantle and then take the leadership. Then the whole political process was hijacked by people who never fought for democracy. And that is why many people in the position of power today have not paid any price for democracy, and they never knew what sacrifice was all about. All they knew was to join a political party, have a godfather, win elections, and then you do what you want to do. So now, from 1999 to date, the problems we have been having has to do with the fact that we are still under military, well, we are still under civil rule and not yet democratic. because the political players, the political class, have still not been able to shed off the very fact that we are in a democratic era. And that is why, as Fallon said, people are still detained without trial, court orders are still being disobeyed, and we still don't understand that the institutions of democracies, the parliament, the executive and judiciary, the arms of government, all have their specific constitutional role. And most importantly, the mindless killings in this country, the violence, the bloodshed, the ethnicity and religious crisis in this country is still attuned to the very fact that democracy is still work in progress.
Let me just jump in there. Why do you think that is the case, them not being able to shed that toga? Because we've had those who many believe, were proponents of democracy. They say they fought for democracy at the time. But when they do get into those positions, even some in the National Assembly, there are many who think that they are found wanting.
Well, I think we should need to understand, and that is the need to also have a very strong civil society. In those days, when you talk of civil society, you talk of a body of committed and determined people that have a cause and a certain principle and standard that they pursue. But now it's quite different. When we are leading protests during the military era, we know that the moment we go out of our house, we end up in jail or be killed. But now the space is a bit clear. You see them many on Unity Fountain in Abuja most times, even protesting and taking selfies with the policemen and sipping juice, and then even with fans and music systems. You can see that there is some degree of change there. And even when they come protesting, they do it for 30 minutes, 1 hour, and then they move away. It's like even a project. And many of them, after the protest, they end up collecting money. So I think the need to have a very strong civil society that will protect and defend democracy, divorced from the politics of this country, is very important. Because as things are now, if Nigerians are not vigilant about this democracy, we are certainly going to slide back to tyranny.
Let me get your thoughts, Senator Zungina, on this, because from where he just finished, would you say then that with the constitution of the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary as the main arms of the government, are you optimistic that we will have that kind of desired change and bring the democracy, the dividends of democracy to the Nigerian people?
Yes, I am optimistic. Let me say that we have had 4 republics. We're in the 4th republic. The first republic, 60 to 66, collapsed barely after 6 years, and it led to direct military. The second republic, barely 4 years. Barely 4 years. So 4 plus 6, 10. Where in the third republic, it's a deformed republic. Should not even be called a republic because it was not democratic. It was still under the military. The fourth republic, where we have direct elections, is 20 years. So even that symbolism, we need to appreciate it. But we also need to know that the fourth republic is suffering from a hangover, and that is the hangover of the spirit of the military. Because the fourth republic from 1999 was actually nurtured by generals that produced General Obasanjo. It was nurtured by generals, handed over to politicians to deliver. And then, of course, Obasanjo nurtured Yar'Adua, nurtured Goodluck. Still the spirit of the military. Even the current president was also nurtured by generals. So we are still in the spirit of the military. Although we have civil activities, democracy, voting, elections, by-elections, courts, but the overriding spirit is predominantly with a dose of militarism. So that is a bit of... What will it take so now what it will take is when we have a generational shift, we must have a generational shift away from the spirit of the military. And I think what the president has done in the elections of 2019, which is to cut off the influence of the military in the election. And when I say the spirit, well, of course, most of the military elements that have been nurturing our politicians try to nurture counter political elite to him, and he was able to dispense with that one election through direct appeal to the voters. So we believe that there should be a generational change. After President Buhari, I believe that successive governments are likely to come directly from the civil populace and from electoral matter without the influence of the spirit of the military. I believe we will get there. I want to say that from 2023, we are likely to see governance that is purely based on the constitutional arrangement and not the background influence of militarism. That is the optimism that some of us have. Because in the 20 years we have been around under a democracy, I have explained to you that much of that had actually been teleguided and engineered by the spirit of the military. Now, I believe sincerely that if we have the electoral system tinkered a bit by the National Assembly, we must tinker with the electoral system. We must create jobs to take off idle hands from the populace, which are even more in number than the security forces. We must expand the security agencies in Nigeria. In fact, I would say that we are like in a war situation, and we have been outnumbered by the criminals. So what tends to happen now is if there is some attack somewhere, some policemen are moved from where they are busy to that place.
Are we outnumbered, or is it the strategy?
Yes, so we have to...
No, the question
not strategy, the
not
numbers.
the strategy, it's the numbers.
The numbers. We must contend with the numbers. We are a population of 200 million people with 400,000 policemen, 200,000 of who are guarding politicians, guarding banks, guarding judges, and doing other civil works. Maybe only 200,000 are available for actual police duty, which is totally inadequate for a population of 200 million. So no wonder we have been totally outnumbered by the criminal gangs. So we can't keep calling on the police and the police. They don't have the adequate, then the training, then the equipment as well. But over and above that, we must keep the society, we must create jobs. The political elite at the National Assembly with the executive must create jobs that will take off most of these criminals from idle disposition towards people who employ them for that. So I think once we do that, and that cannot be done overnight, but there must be governments that must be committed, first and foremost, to suppressing and bringing to a barest minimum the insecurity in the land. And then secondly, finding jobs for the elements being recruited to inflict that insecurity.
Okay, let me quickly pick on something you said
yes.
With Senator Sani. How do we achieve this generational shift that Senator Zwingina talked about, given that there is a lot of apathy, as far as the youth are concerned, towards our political evolution to date?
Well, it is not peculiar to Nigeria. When you have a new generation of people who are not conscious of history and where the nation comes from, if you look at what is happening in Iran and even up at South Africa today, most of the young people today who are standing up against the established order were people who never experienced the revolution that brought those governments to power. So many of the young people of today, except few of them who decided to sift through history, don't actually care about what happened. But I think with an event like this, and with the spirit of a day like this, it brings to spotlight and it recalls to them the importance of history and knowing that Nigeria didn't begin from just 1998. It began from somewhere where there was a struggle, that this democracy, it was not a gift given to us by the military. It was not a lottery that we won. It was a struggle where some people died and some people were in prison. In as much as we appreciate the Fidel Castros of Cuba, yes, Arafat and Mandela, we should also know that there are people here who have sacrificed their life before we had what we want. Now you can freely express yourself today and freely protest because some people fought for it.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, we need to go to break now, but we've had the pleasure of speaking with Senator Jonathan Zwingina, who was the DG of Hope 93 campaign and former Deputy Senate Majority Leader. We also did have Senator Shehu Sani, who is a pro-democracy activist and former Chairman Senate Committee on Loan and Foreign Debt. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for coming on today.
Thank you.
All right, Democracy Day will return in a moment. We still have a guest in Abuja, so stay with us. Welcome back to Democracy Day, the 12th of June. There'll be a lot of activity going on in Abuja, and we will bring you as much as we can. But at the moment, we've been joined by Femi Otubanjo, who is a public affairs analyst, a public policy analyst, and currently a professor of political science and international relations at Chrisland University, Abeokuta. Prof, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Well, speaking about today, what's the significance for you?
Well, I have, I don't know, call it a dubious attitude to June 12th.
Why is that?
I think it's Winston Churchill that says that history is the account of the winner. So what we are having here is the account of the winner. And sometimes when you, as Adolf Hitler said in my camp, if you tell a big lie sufficiently, repeatedly, it will be like the truth. The reality, June 12th is the freest and fairest election, has been repeated and repeated. Was it? I was in the Guardian editorial board, and we were going to write an editorial about the abuses of June 12th. But somebody cautioned us. I said, the idea is to get rid of the military. It's not to have a perfect election. So June 12th has a significance, as people have said, Senator Zubina, Senator Sani, that the significance was to get rid of the military. But it was the product of a failed MOU.
What do you mean by that?
It was a conspiracy between Abiola and Babangida that led to all this rigmarole about our transition, led to the disqualification of several candidates. At the end of the day, threw up Abiola. And at the end, but unfortunately, significant sections of the military did not support that conspiracy. And so it failed at the last minute. But we are asked to forget that. And we need to forget that, the way it came about. If somebody comes and steals and then supplies food, that person is no longer a rogue.
Are you saying that Democracy Day, June 12th, is not was not, set in sincerity for the good of the Nigerian people?
Yeah, it was something but that is not the issue. The issue is that let's look at the origins. But then the significance also is important. We need to have a broad picture of it and not a narrow picture. People have been talking about young people don't know what happened and so on. So we need to tell them this was a failed conspiracy against the Nigerian people in particular.
What was this MOU about?
Well, they agreed to transfer power to themselves. They were friends. They were part of the coup against Buhari. That's the interesting thing, really, that Buhari is the one who is declaring it. He was a victim of it, of that MOU. He was a victim. But really, we don't want to say anything that is libelous. But we know that some of these people were involved in the funding of the coup that overthrew Buhari. And if you are looking for significance, one of the first one, which is not the major one, is the idea that it's a Buhari that is declaring a Democracy Day.
But
Buhari was not Abiola's friend. But Buhari is a conservative person. Don't let us put a gloss on it. Yeah. Buhari was a victim of that conspiracy.
Okay,
but significantly, we may take some solace in the fact that a man that we see to be rigid, conservative, insensitive, is the one who has responded. So he has the capacity to move, to do a U-turn and adopt a position that is polar opposite to his own political sentiments. We need to applaud that.
But there are those who look at significance of the day, Democracy Day, the MOUs and all of those notwithstanding. Yes. They just think that looking at the event that occurred on the day, yes, the essence of democracy, yes, voting, being voted for, the participation, the yes, enthusiasm, all of those ingredients which they think they saw at the time.
I've never rejected the significance. The most important significance for me is that Nigerians, whether defective or not defective, voted across every line. They crossed every line. They crossed the regional, the religious, the ethnic. Every line was crossed. Abiola had a Muslim it was a platform, a Muslim, Abiola and King Gibe. Nigerians did not care. Abiola is a Southerner. But like somebody said, he defeated his rival in his ward in Kano. So it's a significant statement of our aspiration. I can say that by declaring it, it's our aspiration to have a pan-Nigerian platform to be able to have elections that are not constrained, not clogged by all these sentiments. But unfortunately, since then, we have gone backwards. You know, June 12th is significant for us because at least we achieved that. And it's our aspiration.
Just a minute, guys.
Yes.
Speaking about significance,
yes.
The significance of the event, the day itself,
yes.
We've got our correspondent, Diary, though. He's at the venue, a strategic venue, as a matter of fact. So he will tell us. Diary, let's hear from you directly, where you are and what's happening.
26 years after the annulment of June 12 and 20 years of Nigeria's uninterrupted democracy, we are right here at the residence of late Chief MKO Abiola, and the man in the middle of this whole discussion, and right off my shoulder you can see the tomb of the late politician and businessman. Of course, today is a different day. Many civil rights activists have always gathered in this premises, and they've always talked about the struggle restoring the mandate that they claim was stolen. And before the President Muhammadu Buhari, announced or declared last year and made it official some days ago that June 12 will replace May 29 as Nigeria's Democracy Day. And today, here in this premises, they will be expecting the governor of Lagos State, Babajide Sanwo-Olu. And if the governor is not going to be here because of the various activities that will be going on across the country today, or even in Abuja, the deputy governor will be here today. If outside this particular compound, there's a whole lot of security there, traffic officials, and definitely you can tell that something is going to be happening here today. Journalists are already in this compound, and there's a whole lot of setup inside the building and outside the building. Of course, we'll keep tabs of the situation around here. It's way too early to tell you a whole lot. We'll be giving you updates as events play out in the coming hours. Back to you, studio.
All right, then. Thank you very much indeed, Diary. Yeah, let's bring it back here. I think we should go to Abuja now and get Mr. Fallon's perspective on this. I mean, perhaps in addition to what you were going to say earlier, or let me just allow you to respond or comment. I suspect you wanted to make a response previously. Did you? Or we move on? Mr. Fallon.
Yes, I just wanted to respond to the contribution of Senator Shehu Sani, who was trying to say that the civil society is not monitoring, what is going on. I don't think that will be fair. I think what we have had since the past 20 years have been efforts to hold people accountable, and unlike under successive military dictatorships, whereby you couldn't go to court, even to challenge violations of rights. People were detained illegally. Malcolm here was kept for 4 years in the Gulag. His union, Nupeng, was proscribed. Pengassi was proscribed, ASU and others. And so even when we went to court, and in the case of Pengassi and Nupeng, the judge gave an order. Before we knew what was going on, the judge said the proscription was illegal. The chief judge then of the federal court said the judge made a mistake, and that, the union remained banned. In the case of the Nigerian Bar Association, the decree banning the association prescribed that anybody who goes to court to challenge anything done or purported to be done under this decree will be deemed to have committed an offense and sentenced to imprisonment for 1 year and payment of 10,000 naira fine. So that was what we went through, whereby the jurisdiction of the court was ousted in many areas of our life. But what we now have under the present constitution, which is by no means perfect, you could go to court. But the other problem we have is compliance with court orders. I'm happy we are being assured here that this government operates under the rule of law. Yes, very good. I hope with effect from today, all those orders of our court that are not being obeyed will now be complied with. Legislators too, like Senator Shehu Sani, you know, we will have expected him, coming from the civil society, to have taken the battle against illegal payment of jumbo pay, not just disclosing it to us, but he was the one who confirmed to Nigerians that the running cost of a senator in Nigeria was about 13.5 billion naira. But he didn't go beyond that. So what do you expect the civil society to have gone? They've gone to court. The civil society is in court to have a declaration that such payment, outside what is prescribed by Section 70 of the Constitution, which is to the fact that it is Revenue Mobilization, Allocation, and Fiscal Commission that shall fix the salaries and allowances of legislators. Not that legislators themselves will fix their salaries and allowances. So these illegal actions are being challenged, including the campaign, political prostitution in Nigeria. So the duty of those who are coming from the civil society, who have found themselves either in the executive or the legislature, is to ensure that those ideas are, you know, actualized in government. Those ideas are implemented in government. And that is why June 12 is so significant. Of course, I agree with Prof there, you know, to enjoy that, yes, it wasn't a perfect arrangement. People have been banned before Abiola and Tofa met. But I think the point has been made abundantly clear. After that election, Bashir Tofa, the other candidate of the NRC, congratulated his opponent. And that is what is done in any civilized society. He was under pressure to go to the tribunal. He said, no, I have no business going to the tribunal. The election was fair and free. From that moment, the civil society came in, the progressive trade unions came in, and made the country ungovernable for the dictators. And by the way, and that would be my advice to the government, beyond recognizing Chief Abiola, beyond the national honor, well deserved, conferred on him, as well as Chief Gani Fawemi, we must also identify other heroes of that struggle from all over the country. From all over the country. This was not an Adekwa affair alone, or affair business. As a matter of fact, unknown to most Nigerians, Nadeko was born on May 31st, 1994. We've been in this business since Buhari Idi Agman regime came in December 1983. So, but when you now talk about the history of June 12, the Chima Ubanis, Bamidele Aturus, Sylvester Odionake, Gite Ogunye, Luke Aganenu, and our women, Oke Odumaki, Ngozi Iwere, and others, who were waging the struggle when some of us were captured and taken to jail houses. These were the young people who made it ungovernable for the military dictators to have their way. And at the end of the day, we won the battle for the restoration of civil rule in the country. Our duty now, particularly for the likes of Shehu Sani, who have found themselves in the legislative house, is to remind their colleagues all the time where we are coming from, and not to make a mockery of those who are waging the struggle for change in the country.
Unfortunately, Mr. Senator Sani he's left the studio. It would have been really nice if he had any premonition that he was going to be needed to respond to what you've said, but who knows, we might find a way to get him to respond to these things. But let me bring in Mr. Omar on this. Incidentally, he is the Special Assistant to the President on National Assembly Matters, I think, for the House of Representatives. On this question about emoluments to the National Assembly, laws and bills being assented to by the President, court orders being obeyed, Is this something that, do you find any reason or any aspects that you think you may need to advise Mr. President on, such that the impression that people have of those things, if they are not correct, can be corrected? Mr. Umar?
Well, I believe we're evolving democratically, and the fact that with this, we have been in an uninterrupted democratic governance in Nigeria for the last 20 years. Yes, we have grown in that regard. However, it's a continuous process of engagement, of learning, and of improvement. So certainly there are a lot of areas whereby starting with, a good harmonious relationship with the legislature and between the legislature and the executive would help in deepening democracy, appreciating the separation of powers, but at the same time working for the progress and development of Nigeria. Because even though the various arms of government are independent of each other, there is definitely a link and a relationship. And as you rightly mentioned, in terms of making laws, assenting to these laws by Mr. President or declining assent for various reasons, which all the time would come with comments why those bills are not assented to, for the legislature to look at it with a view to effecting the necessary corrections and always returning it to Mr. President for his consideration and assent. You find that we are hoping that certainly the relationship would improve tremendously, and in the 9th Assembly between the legislature and the executive, with a view to delivering on the promises made to Nigerians of inclusive development and growth, in promoting all the ideals of good governance, of economic development, of security, which the president campaigned on, anti-corruption drive. So to that extent, I believe that we'll see a lot of improvement, and there has been over the years, I must say. Deepening democracy, appreciating the rule of law, and of course engaging the public in governance is very significant. And I also believe that we need voter education, because it has been observed in this discussion that there is a lot of voter apathy, vote buying, which this administration has recognized. And of course, in the spirit of fighting corruption, Mr. President has at various fora mentioned the ills of such in the polity, and certainly the need to convert that. And that is why, you find that the three fundamental things that Mr. President and the APC government campaign on: security, anti-corruption, economic development, and empowerment. And to that extent, I'm sure this government had done a lot, as you can see through the social intervention programs and initiatives of this government, whereby the youth and the women and have been empowered through various intervention, and also the expansion of the revenue base through agricultural development is certainly commendable. And these are projects that are being taken to the next level in this dispensation. Of course, with the inauguration of Mr. President for his second tenure, I'm sure a lot of things would be seen to have continued in the trajectory of improvement. Having said that, I want to also mention that we need to not only go into history, but to take from history going forward the significance of this day and the celebration behind June 12. My senior brother and elder statesmen here have spoken and have, narrated all the struggles that culminated, or that happened after the annulment of June 12. But I think for those Nigerians, and indeed the younger generation that did not participate, this is a sober reflection. And also is an enlightenment to the fact that there was a time when Nigeria was not what they see today. There was a time when the union was great. There was a time when Nigerians came together and spoke with one voice and expressed their will. And, like what the professor said, it cuts across all these barriers that we have. And certainly, I think that is something very fundamental and key. And we can still return to that. And one of the ways to do it is to deepen the process, to have, party, to strengthen the party democracy, and also to hold representatives accountable. There needs to be an engagement. And as Mr. Fallon, senior advocate, rightly captured, that people need to be accountable, and also the voting populace need to hold their representatives to account. There needs to be some stewardship. And certainly also there shouldn't be the apathy to the extent that they are not engaging. Because I believe part of the problem is people thought when they vote for you and they don't see you again for another 4 years, and they don't call you to account for what you have done after they had sent you to lead or to represent them, be it in the executive or the legislative arm. And I think that is why sometimes you find that there is a bit of hopelessness around the voting population, to the extent that they feel, no, they're not going to waste their time. But I think this is a system that can only be improved if you find active participation and indeed inclusion. And I also believe when the parties are strengthened, you find that what Senator Sani had espoused earlier, where you find, godfatherism, if you like, in quotes, in politics, where people just anoint and dictate who becomes what, will be certainly minimized, because people will take it upon themselves and would appreciate that it's their right to choose whom they want. And I think that is one of the most fundamental takeaways from Democracy Day and indeed June 12 and its struggle. The fact that the people's will
let me jump in and ask you.
Be respected at all times.
Let me ask you now,
Yes.
and briefly too, in terms of your response, could you speak to this narrative or impression that some people have that the executive doesn't want to have a legislature that will ask them questions, or at least, hold them accountable, or ensure that they uphold the separation of powers? Hence, they wonder why insist on having certain persons emerge as leaders in the National Assembly.
Certainly not. In fact, I believe that a legislature that holds the executive accountable makes a better makes a better executive. In the spirit of the separation of powers, it dictates that you find that these are arms of government, even though independent, but working together to deliver to the Nigerian people. That is, I believe, it's a matter of checks and balances. And when you have somebody checking you and telling you and observing what you do and bringing insights into what you do with a view to bettering it, I believe it gets you to a higher level and it makes you do better. It brings the best in you. So certainly the executive and indeed this government and this president is one that respects and recognizes the separation of powers and believes that working together without any one of them usurping each other's powers would deliver faster the needed policies and programs of government to the people. However, one needs to also respect each other's rights and responsibilities.
All right.
So the executive is certainly it has been engaging the legislature and will continue to engage it positively with a
All right,
view
we'll still get your views
working
on that.
together with it.
Really, we just need to speak about this. The images we see here, we'll come back to you, Omar. The images you see here are live pictures from the Eagle Square, where we expect the parade, as Kayla and Ibrahim Adra did tell us initially. And speaking of which, they're still there, as a matter of fact, in Abuja. So let's get to them and get some updates. Kayla and Ibrahim, go ahead.
Obviously, a very good job has been done of it. People are staying in designated places where they should be. And what's more, there appeared to be a very big TV screen in front of those places. So the cases where before now you had, oh, that's a chopper flying overboard, it's the police maintaining some sort of vigilance over the Eagle Square. So I was saying that TV arrangement is a very good thing that has happened. People can actually watch what's happening right where they are sitting. That will bring some sort of sanity.
I think everyone who's watching on TV right now, yeah, it's a great thing that you're tuned in and you're watching, but there is nothing more magical than actually being here and witnessing this. We just saw the guards do their salute and take their position, and of course you can still hear them in the background. And then we're looking forward to seeing, a lot of the speeches. Well, it's one speech basically, the Democracy Day address. That is the main thing that we're looking forward to watching later. But for now, we're seeing arrivals of a lot of guests, lots of traditional rulers, a lot of government functionaries. The APC chieftains are here. Mr. Bola Tinubu just came in, and we're looking forward to seeing who else is going to be here. We spoke earlier with, two interesting people. We first of all spoke with Hafsa Abiola. That's right. Hopefully we get to talk to her a bit later. But there was a very interesting group of people that Ibrahim got to meet here. Tell them about it.
They go by the name Victims of the Third Republic. Now I asked them whatever that means, and they told me they are the elected representative who were supposed to be in the House of Representatives at that time, but never were there. So they came out in full force. They have a stand specifically set aside for them. They're wearing lovely T-shirts with Victims of June 12 on their chests. And I told them how significant this thing is to them. And they said, this means the world to them. This means a validation of June 12. It feels like it's them in office at the moment, but they have a problem. According to them, they have not been compensated since 1999, and they want some sort of monetary compensation. They said the governors are fine.
They were very specific.
They were specific. They want money for compensation. And I didn't want to ask what is the money for, because they never go into the legislature.
The interesting thing about that is that is one part of this story that we haven't really talked about, isn't it? The people, not just the president, not just Mr. Moshood Abiola, but also those who ran for other offices.
Were elected duly.
And were elected during that particular election. So when that election was cancelled, a lot of these people had to basically go back home or whatever. And those are the people that we saw here today. Hopefully we get to talk to them a little bit later.
Talking about going back home, he said one Mr. Anolefo, who is the chairman, he said he's the national chairman, did say about 145 of those members have died. And he attributed that to neglect, to use his words. Now, whether they have a genuine case of valid reason for compensation, we don't know. And I'm also hoping that in the course of the program, we'll probably be able to speak with them as well.
Hopefully that happens really soon, but we will be going back to Lagos, back to you guys in Lagos right now, so we can get a feel of what's going on here, and then we can chat with you a little bit later.
Oh, yes, indeed. And well done, guys. We'll hope to keep tabs. We will keep tabs with you as we proceed. But we'll go to break and be back in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back to Democracy Day. Welcome to you live from Lagos. And keeping an eye on the Eagle Square in Abuja. Yes, we expect some activities there sooner rather than later. And we'll bring you that as much as we can. But let me get, still in Abuja, Chikokori, let me ask you, there's this school of thought that believe that the values that, we need to propagate at this time in this democracy in order to ensure that it's ingrained deeper in the minds of, in the consciousness of people, one man, one vote, amending the Electoral Act such that it reflects what the people want much more, dealing with poverty, that's poverty alleviation, the anti-corruption psychology. Do you share these same thoughts as some people think we should focus on to improve or deepen democracy at the period?
Yes, I think that was why we went into that struggle, because we felt that Nigerians were not getting their due rights. They were not given their rights to select their leadership, and there was not much of justice and equity for the people. That's why I continue to say that there's no alternative to democracy. Because if there was democracy, nobody would just pick me in the middle of the night and ferry me out from Lagos to Shangisha, to Awolowo Road, from Shangisha to Awolowo Road, from Awolowo Road to Abuja, from Abuja to Maiduguri, from Maiduguri to Bama prisons, and locked me up for 4 years in a solitary confinement on the fringes of the desert. So we have no alternative for democracy. But yet, like as I said, 20 years of Nigeria's democracy, some of us are disillusioned because those aspects you just mentioned in your questions, security, equity, justice, are still lacking in most areas of Nigeria's day-to-day life. And we felt that Nigerians are not having a fair deal. There are elections, yes, but elections are not still very perfect in Nigeria. But it's better than military dictatorship. I'm from the south-south region of Nigeria, where votes don't count, even up to today. Votes don't still count. You buy votes, you inflate figures, so votes don't still count. But I want a system where votes will count. And we had our eyes open when we say we have to fight for democracy, because we know the difference between democracy and dictatorship. So we want
if I may just
our president now.
My apologies, if I may just butt in so that I can get the views of Mr. Fallon. I can hear him just chuckle by your side there, but if I may, my apologies, if I may just butt in so I can get Mr. Fallon's views. Are you in trust of the Buhari administration's capacity to deliver on this democracy such that the people of this country feel a sense of being protected?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, okay. Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, I think we have to make this a collective battle. The Nigerian people will have to move out and demand from the government adequate security all over the country. Again, this should not be limited to Abuja alone. We must get our governors in line with the provisions of the Constitution to share police powers with the president. Section 216 of the Constitution is very clear. It provides that the president cannot appoint or remove the Inspector General of Police without consulting with members of the Nigerian Police Council. The members of the Nigerian Police Council shall administer, organize, and supervise the Nigerian police force. Who are the members of this council? The president, the Inspector General of Police, the chairman, Police Service Commission, and the 36 state governors. So we must henceforth demand that this body meets regularly to address insecurity in our country. Secondly, the attention being paid to the emergence of the leadership of the National Assembly must also go to each of the constituent units in the country. The way Nigerians show interest in the budget presented to the National Assembly, we must also ensure that the budgets of each state is publicly debated. The budget of each local government is publicly debated. In fact, most Nigerians do not even know that local governments are supposed to have budgets. So all these efforts will have to be coordinated by the progressive segment of the civil society. We have to mobilize our people to defend their rights, to demand their rights from the government, and ensure that the resources of the country are distributed to take care of the problems of the country. As my comment has said, Nigerians will no longer accept any excuse from the president. Now that you have two leaders of the National Assembly endorsed by the party and the presidency. We therefore expect that we are going to have laws that will be enacted now to address the problems confronting us as a people. Darkness must end. Egypt has just generated 14,000 megawatts of electricity with the sum of $9 billion. Here, a regime-generated darkness with $16 billion. We must ask questions. Who gets what? How and when? That is the national question. It's not about getting champions of ethnic groups together. It's about the interests of our people. You have poverty-stricken people all over the country. You have illiteracy all over the country. You have massive ignorance.
All right, Mr. Fallon.
Address the problems of all our people.
All right.
Without any discrimination.
I reckon that Mr. Mao will be taking all of that on board because, I mean, Nigerians will be looking to see a smooth one now that those elections have happened in the National Assembly, as you also have said. But we have to thank you all, Mr. Femi Fallon, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Chief Frank Kokori, pro-democracy activist and former Secretary General of NUPENG, as well as El Yakubu Omar, Senior Special Assistant to the President on National Assembly Matters. Gentlemen, thank you all for talking to us today on Democracy Day. So we'll bring you back here to Lagos. Professor Tubanjo here with us. Now, 20 years on, are you disillusioned, as Mr. Kokori did say some people are?
No, I'm not. Democracy is not an event. It is a process. It's an evolving process. It's almost an organic process in which you will have all kinds of difficulties, challenges. The important thing is to plod on and make sure that you continue to address those challenges. First, we've been lucky that we have been able to sustain it for 20 years. That in itself is an achievement. Nigeria is still fairly an unstable country. And the reason is because the superstructure is unjust. You cannot be talking about the substructure when the superstructure. We have an unjust state structure. We have an unjust local government structure. There is agitation. There is dissatisfaction with all those structures. We cannot have 5 states in the southeast, where some places have 7. I don't expect them to be happy. So we must continue to work on reforming our system. People have talked about all kinds of policy things, but let's address the substructure. That's why people are talking about restructuring.
Can democracy address the restructuring question?
Well, it's a democratic process. That's why we have an elected president, representatives. The president can take the initiative and listen to the people. I was listening to Mao, the senior special assistant, made so much about General Buhari's, President Buhari's democratic instincts and his commitment to righting some of the injustices in the country. The greatest injustice in this country is the state structure and the local government structure.
How should we go about that?
That's what Buhari should write by calling the Constitutional Assembly.
But we have
a report, yes, but
we have had that over the years.
Look at the reports.
But what is the injustice first?
Eh?
What is the injustice that you
The injustice. Do you know that 20 or so years ago, Sokoto was 1 state, became 4 states. Now has 84 local governments, Lagos has 20. The 84 local governments in the Sokoto state is more than the entire number of local governments in the southeast. So what do you call that? Justice? You cannot have that and expect that the country will continue to go. There will always, why do you think people are talking about Biafra? Because they see this injustice. You know, for example, I'm sorry to say this, that they just had an election to the National Assembly. The speaker ought not to come from the southwest because we already have number 2 president. When you do that injustice and you think that the country will continue to go on.
But they elected it, they did that election amongst themselves in the hollow chambers.
These things were zoned, they were arranged, pre-arranged. Why do you think that Oshimole was going there to sit? Is he a member of the House of Representatives? He went there to ensure that some of the arrangements, but the arrangements spanned that to leaders.
But there's nothing wrong with him.
People.
He's the party chairman. There's nothing wrong with him being there.
Did I say anything was wrong? No, I said, why do you think he went there? Because he wanted to monitor that the arrangement of the party was not subverted like it was done in the previous assembly. So let's not deceive ourselves. You can talk about peripheral reforms. Most of the time, people say you leave leprosy and start curing eczema. That means there are fundamental and there are superficial.
Okay, now you said that we need to take care of the superstructure as opposed to the substructure.
Yes.
Now you also talked about this local governments, in Sokoto State and Lagos and all of that. But an attempt was made to create local governments in Lagos, and it didn't happen. What? So all of the things that we've had so far, came, during the military and all of that. So how do we solve this problem fundamentally?
It was already suggested in the last Constitutional Assembly.
Okay.
Let states look after their local governments. Let states be the one to. Lagos has created 37 local government development areas. So we'll ask the same number, some number, all of them. Let the local governments devolve to the states. That's part of the restructuring argument. Okay. It's devolution of powers. Let each state, you cannot give money from the federal purse to 84 local governments in one state that does not even have the population of Lagos and give to only 20 local governments in Lagos. However much you want to see it, it is not going to go down. It is not going to be forgotten. People are going to be agitating for reforms.
In line with the process of strengthening our democracy, many people have also faulted the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria of 1999, even as amended and all of that. What's your take on that?
Well, the Constitution is not perfect. It's not a perfect document.
So now you're also talking about us, devolving power to the states.
Yes.
How can we do that with is it possible with the kind of
No, when you say that, that is just a declaration. You are assuming that declaration will set in motion the processes for reform. Basically, you have to do a constitutional amendment in many areas, in which you shift certain things from one section of concurrency and exclusive, you shift more from the exclusive to the concurrent, and so on. Those are the kind of things that you have to have a major constitutional change. To have a change in the structure of local governments, you have to have constitutional change.
You also remember, sir, that a number of constitutional reviews, constitutional conferences, constitutional amendments have taken place over the past few years and all of that. So what has become of them? Clearly
because simply there's no will to implement the recommendations. The last one was just 2016, 2017. The book is there.
What do you think is responsible for that lack of will?
Well, political, I mean, don't let us, you're saying people go no sorrow. We don't talk with all our mouth. You know that those in powers now do not want things to change.
Do we need legislative involvement to address concerns of insecurity, for instance?
No, that's an administrative management issue. It's the problem of government. And don't forget that we just had an election. Usually, in post-election periods, gun-related crimes tend to increase because the politicians have already given their thugs guns. Sometimes they are not successful in retrieving those guns. So I guess that with time, it is a policing matter. And when you start talking about bandits, then you move to the territory of the military, because the police cannot pursue bandits to jungles. So it's a matter of synchronizing their activities to make sure that those bandits, if you police Lagos or Ibadan or Akure road properly, I mean, by the time you kill 2, 3 others, will see that it's not a profitable enterprise, and they will run.
Although we're still expecting that white paper to get to Mr. President before all of that.
Don't worry, I won't let them let you talk with all your mouth. So we need to go to break now, but we appreciate Femi Otubanjo, public policy analyst and currently professor of political science and international relations at Chrisland University, Abeokuta. Thank you very much, bro, for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, as we did tell you, a lot is happening in different parts of the country. Well, our correspondent, Nachin Vincent, also on standby. Nachin, what's happening?
Nigeria has been in a democratic system of government without any interruptions, especially from the military, since 1999. And this year has also been an election year, 2019 general elections, where the masses went to the polls to cast their votes, to choose those that will govern them and what they expect as dividends of democracy. Nigeria is marking her Democracy Day today, 12th of June. And so we would be speaking with the masses to find out how democracy has affected their lives.
The democracy we saw this time around is not the one we saw before the war, when we have the independence. The one we have, the time we have independence in Nigeria, we saw the democracy was very good. Things are working fine. And the people in top, now the government, now take care of the poor and take care of the masses and do the work they're supposed to do for the masses. Building hospitals, schools, building markets, building roads.
Democracy in Nigeria generally, I believe, has helped women positively. Because when you look at the way women are advancing in the democratic society or in the democratic world in Nigeria, I think is an improvement. Slowly but surely we're getting there. We're being suppressed most of the time because I think it's an African thing, not only a Nigerian thing. I think it's an African thing except for Rwanda, who has a very high number of women in elective positions.
I think the foundation has already been laid, and what we really need to do is to continue to build the structure, the democratic structure, to reach a level that will be to the pride of all Nigerians. My belief is, yes, there are achievements here and there, and if you remember 2011, there was a successful transition, from one party to another. That's also marked another milestone. However, in the areas of socio-economic well-being, yes, we really need to do more, especially in terms of poverty reduction, in terms of employment, in terms of economic empowerment for our teeming youth, and in terms of building strong institutions that will give proper backing to the democratic dispensations.
Yes, Nigerians are hopeful and optimistic that the dividends of democracy will surely unfold as the years go by. From Kano Metropolis, Nanchin Vincent reporting for Channels Television News.
The people of Nigeria, through their democratic decision of June 12, 1993, expect me to assume the reins of government. I fully intend to keep that date with history.
A landmark in Nigeria's history. An election Nigerians cannot forget in a hurry. June 12, our new Democracy Day in Nigeria. A milestone in the annals of our political journey. On the 20th year of our return to civilian rule. Channels Television got you covered on our extensive coverage of the June 12 inaugural Democracy Day celebration. Follow the trends. #Democracy.